Okay, so this is a crash course in Sculpties. Sculpties is an ancient form of mesh that Second Life used to have. First we started off with prims only, and then we had prims and Sculpties, and then we finally had mesh. Sculpties are still used by some people for like doing islands and stuff like that, land, because it has a lower land impact than making something out of mesh. I used to be a Sculptie master, so I'm trying to dust off my brain and try to remember all this stuff. Okay, so first you need an exporter for Maya, and you go here. There'll be a link in the description for this page. This was done by Carl Linden, or Carl Stefada is his name, his real name. He's no longer with Linden Lab. He's still alive. He's just no longer with Linden Lab. And this is a script that he made. He came up with Sculpties. So you come to this page, come here down this Sculpt Mill. And the easiest way to do it is just click anywhere on the page, and then Control A to highlight it all. Copy it, and then come to your Maya. Pick whatever tab you want to have the exporter on. I'm just picking Sculpting because sculpting, that's cool. And open up your script editor, and make sure you're on the Mel tab, not on the Python, but on the Mel. Paste what you did before. Control A to select it all. Go File, Save Script to Shelf. I'm just going to name this Sculptie _ exporter. Okay, you can name it whatever you want. Okay, and move this off the side. Okay, and now we have that button there, Sculptie. It doesn't show the whole name because it's too long. And here's the exporter. The maximum size of Sculptie that you want to export out is 64 by 64. Don't want to go any bigger than that, because if you do, it's just a waste. It doesn't give you any more accuracy or anything like that. So 64 by 64 is the max, and that's what I usually always export out as. I'm going to turn off Generate Prim Script. I'm going to turn off Maximize Scale, and I'm also going to turn off Correct Orientation when I finally do export out. So we'll go Save Settings. We're going to close that. Okay, so a couple things you need to know about Sculpties. I'm going to go over the basics, teach you some of my tips and tricks. Okay, I created a plane. A Sculptie is really just a plane. Okay, it really is just a plane. And it's a plane made up of subdivisions of 31 by 31. Is all a Sculptie really is. What is it? Where is it? Wireframe unshaded. Okay. Okay, that's all it really is. I'm going to hide the grid. Okay, that's all a Sculptie really is. It's 31. Now, okay. Even though it was 31 by 31. Oops, let's go to vertex. It's really 32 vertices. See, 32 by 32. Okay. And that when you make a Sculptie map, if you were to make a Sculptie map of 32 by 32 instead of 64 by 64, this would be the upper left-hand pixel of that image. This would be 1 pixel in, and so forth. That each one of these vertex represents a pixel on that image, and that the RGB values of that image represent the XYZ coordinates of that particular vertex. There's some downside to that in that XYZ RGB is limited to 256 shades of red, blue, and green, which means you're working with like a ruler that only has 256 markings on it, spacing on it, or whatever you want to call it. There's no 10.5 on that scale. It's either 10 or it's 11 or 9. You know, if you're looking at 10, it's either going to go up by 1 down or down by 1. And so its resolution is somewhat limited. And so it's a scale, think of it as a cube, 256 units up by 256 units wide by 256, so height 256, width 256, depth 256. That's it. That's what you got to work with as far as resolution. And so that's one of the limitations. Okay, so let's see. Now, if you do 64 by 64, what that's going to be, it's going to be, you know, 2 pixels wide by 2 pixels down. You know, so it's going to be like 4 pixels going to make up that one vertex, the position for it. And this is, let's see. So I'm going to duplicate this, right? Well, we're going to name this one original. No, we're going to name this one original. Even though it's not the original, we can name this one the low poly. You know, it's a low poly version. We'll call it low poly. Okay. And we can put it on its own layer and name it low poly, but with an underscore at the end. Oh, low poly underscore. I could have made it just, okay. And I misspelled this one. Low poly. Okay, because one has an underscore, one doesn't have an underscore. They're two separate names, so they're not going to clash. Okay. And this is the original. This is we're going to call this one. This one's going to be a little bit different. Okay. We want. Okay. Oh, so if we look at this, and we know this was 32 by 32, right? And total is 1024. That's pretty cool, huh? So there's 1024 vertices that go into a Sculptie. And so what we're going to do with this one is we're going to change the resolution from 31 to 31. See, it's because it starts off with 0. That's why there's you used to do one less than that. What we want to do is we want to do 63 by 63. Okay, so we have 63 by 63, and that gives you 64 by 64. Okay, what I'm going to do is to get the most, okay, if you don't care about accuracy, or I mean, this part of the video is really good if you're going to be like bumping Sculpties up next to each other. Like say you're going to do an island, and you know, one Sculptie map 64, one giant mega Sculptie of 64 by 64 cube size or whatever isn't a high enough resolution. So say you want to break that down to 4 Sculpties for your land, but you want where they meet to be seamless. Okay, so this is where this comes into account. Is we're going to create the 64 by 64, and then we're going to do something here. Okay, first I want to select every other edge, and so I'm going to create another nice little tool, and I'm going to show you where that tool is. Hold on, let me find it. Okay, so newer versions of Maya might already have this built in, but this nice little video here makes it easier to, you can watch it if you want, and you can change this number right here. 2 means every other edge. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come back into here, delete that, paste that, select all, oops. Save script to shelf, every other, I'm going to say, okay, every other, you see every O. Okay, so now when I click that, it selects every other edge. Okay, I'm going to hit W on the move tool, hold down the key, the V key, and I am going to snap it to there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, then I'm going to hold down the V key. I'll make sure that let me dock this. Okay, make sure that your move setting is set to retain component spacing. Hold down the V key to snap to point, and we just moved those every other edge over 1. So now, if I go to vertex and select it, you see we have 2. But now we want to do the same thing to here, every other edge, and we're going to do the same thing. Hold down the D key, the V key, middle mouse, and click it there. And then hold down the V key, and we're going to go up 1. There we go. So now we have a mesh that has 4 vertex, and it's 4 vertex on each vertice. This looks like 32 by 32, but it's actually a lot more than that. It's 128, or I mean 32 vertices, but it's really 128. Why did I do that? That's so when you export out the Sculptie map, it's going to make sure that the this area of the Sculptie map is all going to be exactly the same color. There's not going to be any blurring, and you'll get a much more accurate Sculptie map, okay, which is what you need if you're going to be matching up scenes of Sculpties. Okay, so we have this now. If I can get there. Okay, so we have that now, and we're going to say this is going to be the export mesh, or export Sculptie. Okay, so and then we'll give it on its own layer. Export Sculptie. Export underscore Sculptie underscore. Okay. Then we can hide that one and show the low poly. Okay. So what we're going to do is we have the low poly, which is 32 by 32, which you have the vertices, 1 each. It's much easier to work with this because they're only 1 vertice, okay? Well, if you tried to work with this, now when you select the vertice, you have to make sure you select all 4 if you're going to move them. And if you're going to try to do things such as average vertices or average vertex, it's not going to work. So, you don't want to work with this one. You want to work with this one. Okay? And so, what we want to do is we want to say, I believe it's, I want to take this. Oh, yeah. See, that's, okay, I forgot one thing. I messed up a little bit. Okay. Let's delete the low poly. Oh wait, is that the low poly? No, whoops, wrong one. delete the low poly, okay, because we want them to be exactly the same. And we're going to duplicate this poly here, and we have the low poly, and we're going to make this one the low poly. Low poly. Okay, and then we're going to add selected objects. Okay, and then we're going to see it has the 4. We're going to merge merge. Okay, so now we've merged it, and now this again is just 1, you know, instead of 4. Okay, so that's our low poly, and I would delete history on it. Delete history, and now that we've got our thing set up here, we probably want to delete the history on this too. Delete history. Okay, now we're set up. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want the export. Okay, so I have the export, and I'm going to control select the low poly. I want the export, and then I select the low poly to become a deformer, a wrap deformer. Okay, so now when we make changes to the low poly, because it's easier to work with, like that, do that, the high poly version is moved, and you see all 4 vertices move right with it. Okay, and so if I wanted to export that out, so okay, is this the low poly? Okay, yeah, so I could export this out right now, and that's what we would get, is exactly that. Okay, but I'm going to show you. Okay, so now we want to show the low poly, hide the export Sculptie mesh. So this is the low poly. Okay, we got the low poly. So now you can do to the low poly anything you want. You can average vertices, you can use the Sculptie brushes, you can do whatever, you know, and you could do things like like this. Okay, let's make this a little higher resolution, 200 by 200. Okay, so it's nice and smooth. And you can do things like you take this and you shrink wrap it to that. I think if I got my, with my et al, it's all about order, you know. Or do you go this to this? And I think with this, we select that, and we're going to shrink wrap it to that. I think. We'll find out. And we shrink wrap it. Okay, and then we need to change the shrink wrap to normals. There we go. Okay, so now, now let's put this on its own layer, so we can hide it. So there's the low poly. It's been shrink wrapped to the sphere, and here is the export poly. See, it's been shrink wrapped. So you can do things like that. You can shrink wrap it. You can use all the regular tools. You do it on the low poly version because it's much easier to work with. And now you export out with the high poly version. We go here to the Sculptie exporter. And we're going to turn off generate print script. We're going to turn off maximize scale and correct orientation. And I'm going to export it out as a BMP. We're going to browse to where we want it to go. Desktop. And we're going to give it a name. We'll call it Sculptie 1 BMP. Okay. Well, let's change it here. Just should have named it Sculptie 1. Well, I could go BMP and then .bmp. Did I get the dot right? Dot. I think I got 2 dots. Well, let's forget the BMP part and put just dot. Is that dot or comma? Okay, dot. BMP. Okay, so we've just exported our BMP out, and we'll come here to Second Life, and close this out. Okay, so we're going to make a cube. We're going to come here to Object, change this to a sculpted. Okay, and we're going to upload our image. There's Sculptie 1 BMP. Okay. You don't want to go any bigger than 64 by 64 because it's just a waste. It's not going to be any more accurate. Plus, you won't be able to use lossless compression when you upload it. Okay. So you click yes. And there's Sculptie 1. And we will just drag it over here. And there is Sculptie 1. Now we've got to change the stitching type to plain. Oops, there it is. And so there is our mesh. Again, because we only have 256 by 256, you get these little, it's not going to be super smooth. You can try moving a vertex just to nudge it in, I'm sorry, you could try nudging if you find the particular vertex that's off a little bit. You could try nudging it out just a little bit. You know, select it and then just try nudging it out just a tiny bit. Let's see. Oh, come on. Drives me crazy. Okay. Okay, let's go edit. Let's go texture, make full bright, color, red. Okay. And then I'm going to go into mode. Okay, so you can see that this is what you see in here. Yeah, there we go. Although it always seems to move the edge over a little bit. So, okay. If you were to go 1024 by 1024, you're thinking, oh, it's going to be more accurate, right? Oops, I wasn't in object mode. Okay. And you were going to say, oh, well, that must be more accurate, right? It's a bigger map. See, one, we weren't allowed to upload it as using lossless compression. And now watch. See if I can't find a better angle. There we go. See, it gets all funky. it's not any better. It looks like it really messed up something there. But yeah, it doesn't make it any better. And if we were to go to texture, turn off full bright, shininess, high, see, and if we go to here, and drop it off there, you know, doesn't really make it any better. So you're just wasting your time. I'm surprised it's doing that. It's because it's you not be able to use lossless compression is why. So you want to use lossless compression. Don't use giant maps like this. It's just a waste. 64 by 64 is really the highest you can get and the most accurate, and it's the largest size I believe that you can do with lossless compression. And maximize scale, just it's basically the same as taking this and scaling it so that it fits a square box. Remember how I was telling you it was 256? Like you're making something in a box that's 256 units tall by 256 units wide by 256 units deep. And it's going by whole numbers. There's no in between the numbers. What this does is it maximizes the scale to try to fit this into the box, take up as much space into that cube or that box, so that it's using as wide a range of colors, differences in the colors as possible. So it's supposed to give you, then you'd have to scale it in Second Life to get to the way you want it. Once you applied it to a square prim, because this prim is completely square. Okay. Sometimes that works, sometimes that really helps. It's up to you. Correct orientation. What does that do? Let's try correct orientation. I have no idea what this is going to do. It's been so long. 64 by 64. Export out. And BMP, don't use JPEG, because JPEG gets compressed. Even if it says lossless compression, it compresses it anyway. You want to use BMP. Export it out. Come here. Build. Upload image. 64 by 64. See how much smaller it was? And then 64 by 64. And it did some funky stuff. So that's why I don't use it either. Yeah, that's so I don't ever use corrected orientation or maximize scale. Generate prim script. I think that's where it will you put it into like a resor, and it will if you're using multiple Sculpties, it will generate a prim script to res it into position. Although we probably have a better one in we probably have this one here that's in MyStar. Scene exporter is 100% accurate. So if you were making multiple Sculpties and you were lining up the scenes so that you had one Sculptie here, another Sculptie here, and you lined up the scene perfectly so that you were overlapping the Sculpties, that the vertices were matching up exactly, then you could export them out and use the scene exporter so that the scene exporter would res them and place them so that they're perfectly lined up with each other. And you would not be able to see the scene unless you had it on super high glossy. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's go to, okay, so if you did do 32 pixels by 32, which you would think would be good because then that would match up with 32 pixels across and 32 pixels down, and so pixel per pixel would match up perfectly. You would think that would be the case. 32 by 32. I think that would be the case, but no. Let me show you. Now, make sure I'll use lossless compression. Make sure that is on. There's 32 by 32. Notice how small it is. See, that's one nice thing about Sculpties is that these 64 by 64 and 32 by 32 is such a small amount of information. They load pretty quickly. Okay. Now that looks smoother, but now what it looks like. It's not. Oops, excuse me. Dang it, I hate it when the camera does that. It's always driving me crazy. Okay. So if we turn on full bright here, we'll be able to see it a little bit better. Okay. I wonder if I switch this to nighttime. Environmental. No. I thought you might be able to see it easier. Where is it? Just had it a second ago. World. Environment. Midday. Okay. So now you can see that it's not 32 by 32. It's probably like 16 by 16. Which will load faster, you know. The land impact is 1 there. It will load faster and be technically lower resolution. Let's see, there's 64 by 64. Let me get that one back out. Is that this one? That's this one. Make sure that's the right one. Come on. Come on. Move over. Come on. Yeah, it was Sculptie 1. Okay. Sculptie 1 is 64 by 64. And so if we do that, we go to Object and watch the vertices. No, see? Twice as many vertices. And this is 32 by 32. Okay, so it's a lot more accurate. And it's also still only 1 prim. Land impact 1. But there are times when you don't need so many vertices, and you saw that in reality, or in you saw that actually the 32 by 32 did actually look smoother. You know, so you got to take all these into account. Okay. So, you know, and if you made it an 8 by 8, it would have even fewer vertices, making it up, you know, or 16 by 16. It'd be half again as many vertices, so it's an even lower resolution mesh. So you can combine a number of very low resolution mesh together to make one giant mesh, and you can be very, like anything in Second Life, you can do things efficiently, or you can do things not efficiently and use way more vertices and stuff that you don't really need to use, and way bigger, you know. Like I said, 64 by 64 is just fine. Now, there are Sculpties that are called oblong. So you can have a, you know, instead of a 64 by 64, if you double the horizontal, that's X, the horizontal resolution, to say 128, doubling it, you then have to make this 32. Because it's always the top number, or you always multiply these two numbers together, and whatever you multiply them to, they should always end up being 10 by 24. So if we take 128 times 32, oh, I guess that's not 10 by 24. 128 times 16? No. 128 by 8? 128 by 8? Yeah. 64. No, 32 times 32. Ah, okay. Yeah, okay. 32 by 32 is 10 by 24. So if we wanted to make it double the width of 64 times 16, which is half of 32, is 10 by 24. Okay. So if you do want to make a mesh that is much longer than it is wide or tall, you can do that. And you just make sure that you double, 128 by 32. It will still say you can use lossless compression. As long as whatever you increase, if you double the one, you decrease the other by, so if you double that, you divide that by half. So then you get the 10 by 24 number. You get the same number of vertices. So, and you might want to do that if, say, you're doing a snake or something that's like a cylinder, a long, skinny cylinder. You might want to have more vertices running in one direction than the other direction. So those are called oblongs. And it's the same principle as you saw me do here. You can set it up exactly the same. And that way you can control exactly where everything is going. Okay, so those are oblongs. Let's see. Okay, so let's go to here. Now you need to figure out how you control hard edges versus soft edges. So I'm going to just delete the sphere. Okay, so the sphere is gone. And now these are back. There's the exported. Okay. Okay. And now here's the low poly version. Okay. If you want to do a hard edge, right? If you do this, it looks like a hard edge, right? And then now we'll export out. We're going to hide that. Okay. And we're going to export this out as a 64 by 64. 64 by 64. And this is going to call Sculptie soft edge. Okay. Export out. And then we're going to come here and we're going to go build, upload, image, soft edge. Right? You see there's the edge. And we're going to upload it. And since anything bigger than 1024 pixels by 10, you understand what I mean. You'll not see that option for lossless, upload with lossless compression. Okay, and then we're going to put that there. And it looks like a sharp edge, but if you've noticed this, it's not. It's not a sharp edge. Let's turn off the shine. And turn off the full bright. And we can turn the color back to white. Okay. And let's rotate it. Okay. This is not a sharp edge. And actually the edge up here is not a sharp edge. It looks like a sharp edge, but the normals are not a sharp edge. Okay. So when you harden and soften normals, so how do you do a sharp edge? Okay, I'm going to Control Z back. Okay, so how you do a hard edge is, let's take this edge. I'm going to hold down the V key and I'm going to snap it over to here. Now remember, I'm doing this on, am I on the low poly? Hold on. Make sure I'm on the low poly. That's the export Sculptie. Make sure I'm on the low poly when I'm doing this. Okay, I do have the low poly. Okay. So you take an edge, hold down the V key, you snap it over. So remember, anytime you have two vertices on top of each other, it will make a hard edge. So now I'm going to, I'm already in edge mode, so I'm going to select. Now I got two edges, and I'm going to select contiguous edge. Okay, so now we've got a hard edge on that. And if we wanted a hard edge here, now we have a hard edge. And you see how it does look like a hard edge now? Here, while on this one it's a soft edge. So we have a soft edge, hard edge, hard edge. And if we were to turn off wireframe unshaded, that's what it looks like, right? Okay, so then if we hide that one, show the one that we're going to export out, which still looks like it's hard edges, but that's okay. Because this is the export. It's the low poly one that's going to be, so now we're going to say hard edge. Hard edge. Sorry about the fan in the background, but it's a hot day. Okay. So, now we go to build, upload, image, hard edge, 64 by 64, and now we, come on, select that. Why won't you select? Come on. Oh, I do have it selected. Duh. I thought I didn't have it selected. Okay, so now if we come here and we have the hard edge one, ta-da! Now we have a hard edge. And that's a soft edge, as you can see. So that's how you control the normals. You're going to have to sacrifice vertices and place them on top of each other. Okay. So that's how you control hard edge on a Sculptie. So, and like I said, by doing this method of having a low poly and the high poly or the exports poly has the vertices on top of each other to make sure that you're exporting out as accurately as you can. Now, sometimes after you've uploaded something, you're going to see a vertex that is popped out of position. It's, and you're like, oh, it's just off by slightly. Say this vertex right here was in Second Life, was slightly out of position. It was popped up one. That's because it got rounded up somehow to the next full digit. Because remember, you only have 256 units in the measurements because 256 different colors of red, green, and blue, or grayscale, however you want to put it. Red, green, and blue. Each one. It's only 256. And so sometimes it gets off by just one. And so if it was in Second Life popped up, just say it was this one right here, and it was popped up, it wasn't in line with the others. What you would do is you would select the low poly version, and you would just move it down just slightly like that, re-export it out, and that should compensate so that the final Sculptie map will have the right color RGBs for red, blue, and green. Because remember, red, blue, and green it gets translated into XYZ positions. Gets translated into the position of the particular vertex. And so, yeah, so that's it. That's all the secrets of Sculpties. Like I said, you can make multiple Sculpties. You can have them seamless. The only time you'll be able to see the seam is if you have shine, applied to the Sculptie, or and low shine probably wouldn't see the seam. but something that has a real high shine to it, you might see the seam. So it's not 100%, but it's pretty dang close. And if you're not using shine at all or very low shine on something, you probably wouldn't see the seam at all. And so there are, like I said, there's benefits to using Sculptie still. A lot of people who like to make islands, using Sculpties because they're so much lower of a land impact, and it's only a visual thing. They turn the Sculptie into a phantom. You know, you make the Sculptie a phantom, and then put some invisible prims where you need things to be solid or something like that. Because you can't walk on a Sculptie. You know, if you made this an island and you had this mountain ridge, oh, I hate it when it does that. Sometimes the camera in Second Life drives me insane. Okay, so if you were to make this into a solid object, it wouldn't be where you can walk over this and you'd hit a bump there. You know, and if you made it an island, this wouldn't be a mountain that you could walk up. You know, Sculpties don't work that way. So that's why they make them phantoms. Oh, one last thing to teach you. Okay. Ooh, I'll even do it here. Okay. So we have our low poly, and let's say we want to make this look like two separate objects, right? So you bring all the vertices into one position, and you do the same thing for here. If I can get it. Come on. Come on. Okay, scale this down. Okay. And then we could snap that to there. Oops. Let's go to vertex. Snap this to here. Okay. And you see that it looks like two separate objects. But you see this thing, what we did is we compressed all these faces. It's called degenerative faces. We compress the faces so that they're all on one point. So when a face made up of vertices becomes a single point, it will get thrown. The Second Life will throw those faces out. Okay. So, but you can see there's 64 vertices making up those two. Okay. And then if we come here to the export, and now we can say Sculptie degenerated triangles, I think it's called. Degenerated triangles or degenerated faces. Degenerated faces. Or we'll say triangles. I think the technical name is triangles. Okay. And export it out. And we come here, and we build, upload image, and we lossless compression. Here it is, degenerated triangles, and there you go. You don't even see the line that's connecting these. And if we go to here, it looks like two completely separate objects, doesn't it? So one Sculptie can look like two separate objects, but they're really a single object. That can come in handy for like jewelry makers that you need to make the object bigger. You know, you need to make the object bigger in size because you can only go down to a certain size in Second Life, which is like, what, 0.05 or something like that is the smallest you can make something, or 0.005, something like that is the smallest you can make something in Second Life. and you need something smaller than that, you use degenerative triangles, and you make the object actually bigger, but they're just invisible. But the object, it will register as being a larger object, and then, you know, you're making it smaller. You know, the part that is visible can be smaller than the Second Life's minimum sizes here. So that can come in really handy. So, and you can do that with mesh too, regular mesh. So, yeah, so that's all the tricks and tips. You know, I could have folded the rest of this into a cube, and it would look like, whoops, it would look like a cube, and then this thing here. So you can do all sorts of cool things. I've gotten, I think the maximum I ever got out was something like 32 separate cubes out of a single Sculptie. I think I had to use an oblong texture, something like that. It was 8 vertices tall by 200 and something, whatever vertices wide, or 128, and then they had to separate each one out and then fold them into a cube. And so then I was able to take those cubes and place them in different orders and do whatever I wanted to each corner of the cube. It was a lot of fun. Oh, and the UV map. Let's look at the UV map. The UV map are always going to be, oh, it's no longer there. It used to be a long time ago. It used to be under Windows UV Editor, but then they moved it here. Okay, and there's the UV map. And if we select the UVs, you can see they correspond. This just happens to be upside down, but they do correspond to there. See, because and see what I mean by see. So when it generates the map, it's going to make this whole corner the same color. At least most of it, 64 by 64. So it's more accurate. So awesome. Well, if you were ever interested in Sculpties, now you know everything you need to know about Sculpties. Sculpties can be a lot of fun. I mean, coming up with different ways of doing it. You can mix Sculpties together seamlessly. It just takes, it's kind of like drawing with an Etch-a-Sketch, you know. It does, like I said, it does have the advantage of a much lower land impact. Let's see, this phantom, let me see if I can't, let's make it really big. Oh, let's make it, let's see, 64, no, I think, what is it, the size is 64 by 64? Yeah, 64. 64 by 64 by 64. Okay, here's my little moon that I have. And it's still a single land impact. See, that's what's great about Sculpties. So you can make something really big with very little land impact, especially if you use the 64 by 64 textures. I think if you use a larger texture, does it give it a bigger land impact? I don't know. Let's find out. No, it doesn't give it a bigger land impact. Let's see, degenerate triangles. I find, okay, so, and then if you want to make something really big, like I did with my Enterprise, is you just use cubes. It's so much easier to have everything just in cubes, and you build everything with the keeping that item, whatever you're making, fit inside a cube. And then you put multiple meshes on top of it. Find a giant cubes, megaprims. I have megaprims that are like 512 by 512 by 512. And so, and that way you know what it's much easier to deal with cubes than it is to try to deal with because once you get over a certain size, over 64 by 64, you can't just squeeze it down. You know, you can't do that to change the size. 64 by 64 though is pretty big. And so, you know, so let's go back to 5, 5, 5, 5. Oh no, I think it was 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Okay. So, so now you know everything about Sculpties that there is to know. They do have their advantages. You can't rig Sculpties, unfortunately. Which is kind of a shame. It'd be fun to play with. So you can't rig them. Yeah, you can't rig them. But you know, they have their uses. They definitely have their uses. And so anyway, so if you were ever curious, I know this is like an hour-long video. For those who made it to the end, congratulations. But now you are official Sculptie masters. So awesome. Have a great day. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. One last thing. Great thing about this, especially if you use 64 by 64 or smaller Sculptie maps, is you can use scripts. You know, you can use a script to change the texture. You know, so you can make animated stuff like doors or windows or buttons. So that's kind of cool. I've seen people do animals, you know, but don't go crazy. As long as you do 64 by 64 and you keep the Sculptie maps really small, you know, they load fast. They don't cause lag. You know, it's those people who use 10 by 24 by 10 by 24 Sculptie maps and bigger, you know, or, you know, that use, you know, huge 10 by 24 Sculptie maps, that those take forever to load. Or not forever, but I mean, they're very slow to load. 64 by 64 is a split second to load. But if you're using 10 by 24 by 10 24 and you try making an animated thing using Sculptie maps, it is very slow, causes a lot of lag. But if you're using such small textures like 64 by 64, you can make animated things that don't cause lag, that load pretty much instantaneously. And the old trick is, if you do have something that's animated using, say, these, you hide another prim somewhere near it. You can make it super small, but you hide a prim that has these textures already applied to the faces of that prim, so that when it does switch, there's no lag for the person watching it, because the textures have already been loaded. And I think you can even make those textures 100% transparent. You know, so you create a prim, and I keep remembering more and more stuff of, and then you do that, and you hide it somewhere. And if you really wanted to hide it near the object that does have texture changing animations, but I think you can change this to like 100% transparency, so that people don't see it, so they can't photo, you know. I'm not too worried about copy bots or about people using the camera and copying textures and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's, yeah, so, but if somebody were, you could make the texture even transparent, but it would still load. It would still load. So yeah, like I say, you just hide that somewhere near this if I wanted to animate this between two different textures. And use a script that just switches between the textures. you can do that. You could even combine these 64 by 64 on a larger texture if you really, really wanted to, and then in the script just tell it to display the different sections of that one texture versus loading the separate textures. Sometimes that's faster to do it that way. I've heard people doing it that way. So they have a slightly larger texture, say like 512 by 512. But then again, if it's 512 by 512, it's not 64 by 64. It's not going to load up as a lossless texture. So no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to add them together on a single texture and then have the script displaying the different textures on one texture. I wouldn't do that because you can't upload it as losslessness, and so therefore you're going to lose accuracy. But if that doesn't matter to you, then you could try it. So anyway, again, you made it to the end, and congratulations. Like I said, you are now a Sculptie master. So go out and have fun. Great. Have a great day. Bye-bye.